Our gospel lesson for today comes from Luke chapter 10, verses 25 through 37 of the New Revised Standard Version. Just then, a lawyer stood up to test Jesus. "Teacher," he said, "what must I do to inherit eternal life?" He said to him, "What is written in the law? What do you read there?" He answered, "You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, and with all your soul, and with all your strength, and with all your mind, and your neighbor as yourself." And he said to him, "You have given the right answer. To do this, you will live." But wanting to justify himself, he asked Jesus, "And who is my neighbor?" Jesus replied, "A man was going down from Jerusalem to Jericho and fell into the hands of robbers, who stripped him, beat him, and went away, leaving him half dead. Now by chance a priest was going down that road, and when he saw him, he passed by on the other side. So likewise a Levite, when he came to the place and saw him, passed by on the other side. But a Samaritan who traveled came near him, and when he saw him, he was moved with pity. He went to him, bandaged his wounds, having poured oil and wine on them. When he put him on his own animal, brought him to an inn, and took care of him. The next day he took out 2 denarii and gave them to the innkeeper, and said, 'Take care of him, and when I come back, I will repay you whatever more you spend.' Which of these 3 do you think was a neighbor to the man who fell into the hands of the robbers?" He said. "The one who showed him mercy." Jesus said to him, "Go and do likewise." May God bless our reading and hearing of the scripture.
Thanks be to God. Reading from the letter of James, chapter 1, verses 19 to 27. "You must understand this, my beloved. Let everyone be quick to listen, slow to speak, slow to anger, for your anger does not produce God's righteousness. Therefore, rid yourselves of all sordidness and rank growth of wickedness, and welcome with meekness the implanted word that has the power to save your souls. But be doers of the word, and not merely hearers who deceive themselves. For if any are hearers of the word and not doers, they're like those who look at themselves in a mirror, for they look at themselves and, on going away, immediately forget what they were like. But those who look into the perfect law, the law of liberty, and persevere, being not hearers who forget, but doers who act, they will be blessed in their doing. And if any think they are religious and do not bridle their tongues, but deceive their hearts, their religion is worthless. Religion that is pure and undefiled before God the Father is this: to care for orphans and widows in their distress, and to keep oneself unstained by the world." May God bless our reading and hearing of the scriptures. So in the first text, we heard about the Good Samaritan. That's a story, parable, that we have heard over and over and over again. I think sometimes we hear something over and over again, it just kind of gets muffled, and we don't always want to hear it again, and we kind of lose track of what it actually means. And we become desensitized to the story. The story is a radical, powerful story. 2 people pass by a Samaritan who has chosen to go down a very rough and dangerous road. This road was between Jerusalem and Jericho. It was the shorter route between Jerusalem and Jericho. Jewish folks took that road, did not take that road very often because it actually went through Samaria, and you did not want to do that. You did not want to go through Samaria because you would actually run into Samaritans, and you did not want to do that. So most of the time, people went around and took the long way around, even though it probably took twice as long. Samaritans were half-breeds. That's what the Jewish folks called them. They were half Jews and half Babylonian Assyrians. They were part of the remnant that was left during the Assyrian Babylonian exile when all the Israelites were taken during the exile. They only took the more important people, the doctors, the learned people, and then left what was left as the remnant. They intermarried with the Assyrians and the Babylonians. So they were half-breeds. So they didn't worship in the right way. They didn't worship in the right place. They looked different. They talked different. And well, we wouldn't want that, would we? So they had different color of skin, different color of eyes, and probably had different color of hair. And that scares us. So they didn't ever want to go through that part of the country, so they went around. And that road was also dangerous. Robbers were on that road, and you often, were attacked and left for dead. This guy decided to take a risk that day, and he was robbed. He was robbed, thrown into the ditch, and left there, half dead. So Jesus says there were two guys who passed by on the other side, two religious people, a priest who knows better and a Levite who knows better. They looked down and said, probably said a prayer and moved on and said, I don't have time. If I touch this guy, he might be a Samaritan, so if I touch this guy, I'm going to have to go through all kind of religious procedures to clean myself up, and I don't have time for that, so I'm just going to move on. You never know what was going through those two guys' minds. So in the past, as we have heard this sermon preached, or we have read this text, which one are you? Are you the guy in the ditch? Or are you the priest, or the Levite, or the Samaritan? I think we want to know, or we want to think, or we want to believe that we are the Samaritan. But what are we really? Honestly, what are we? Well, I don't think we have to actually say it out loud, but I will say it out loud. I'm the priest, because I actually am the priest. My dad, when he finally got his head around the fact that my dad was Catholic, so when my dad finally got his head around the fact that I was actually a pastor in the United Methodist Church, he'd go around the world, in his known universe, and tell everybody that his daughter was a priest. I always thought that was kind of great. I very rarely stop because it's too dangerous. Do you stop? I always have an excuse for why I don't reach out and help that person, that other that is on the side of the road, or that hungry person that is struggling. We don't often take the time that is required of us to do that thing that is required of us, that God is speaking to us in our little heads, that says to us, hey, there's a needy person over here that might need your help. But then we've got all this stuff going on in our head about what time it is and what it's going to require of us. And besides, we live in a dangerous world, and you don't know what is happening and what might happen to me if I might reach out and help this person that I have found that might need this help. So in 2007, our family was in a car wreck. We were towing our first camper with a Mitsubishi, I said it right this time, a Mitsubishi Montero. It was a green Mitsubishi Montero. They don't make them anymore because they roll. And we were in Arkansas. We lived in Topeka, Kansas at the time. We were going to see Neil's grandmother, and we were on the way down to see my dad in Little Rock. We got down into Fayetteville, and we're passing through on I-540. Anybody know where that is in Fayetteville? Aha. So we had come through the tunnel. And that is the only place in Arkansas where there are actually hills. The rest of Arkansas is swamp. Not really, but it feels like swamp. So here we are, we're coming through the tunnel, and as we come through the tunnel, the camper gets a wind, and we start to feel it move, and Neil knows that he can't get it to come back up. And he is an excellent driver, and so somehow, some way, he maneuvers the vehicle in order to make it just flip down, and so we don't roll. So we end up flat, and we don't roll, and we take up the whole interstate. That was great. So, and when we slide, just a tad. So Neil, his window bursts, and we're sliding, and so he's got a rug burn here on his elbow. Every so often, I still pull out some stuff of 540 still out of his elbow. There was no skin for. This is kind of gross, but there was no skin for stitches. That was the only thing that was injury, which was a God thing. Seat belts save lives. So I'm dangling in the seat belt in the front seat. My son is in the back seat behind me dangling, and our daughter Erin is strapped in the back seat. Neil climbs out through the sunroof because we have gas tanks. And so he's thinking to himself very quickly, he's a very quick thinker. He's thinking to himself, I have got to make sure that we don't blow up. We now are still alive. He needs to make sure that they are secure. So he says, I'll be back. So I say, okay, fine. I'm screaming the whole time. My son in the back seat is saying, Mom, we're alive. Please stop screaming. My ears hurt. Mom, we're alive. Please stop screaming. So I finally am able to calm myself down. By this time, a car stops, and I'm like, oh, finally, someone here can help me get out of this seatbelt because we're strapped, and I can't turn around to unbuckle myself, and I can't unbuckle my kids. So, but, we're stopped, and we're relatively safe. No one can get around us, but they're all looking at us. I just know it. Because you know what you do when you see a wreck, right? This guy stops, gets out of his car, and I can see him coming. I'm like, yeah. He peers through the window, and he says, hi, I'm a Baptist pastor up from Fayetteville, and I want you to know I'm praying for you, but I gotta go. And he walks off, gets in his car, and goes right back down I-540. And Erin goes, really, Mom? Hearing the word, but not doing the word comes to mind. James is very clear. He says, those who only hear the word but do not do the word are those who look in the mirror but do not remember who they are. We don't remember what the gospel tells us if we don't actually act upon what we hear in the gospel message. The gospel message clearly tells us that we are to love the Lord our God with all of our heart, with all of our mind, with all of our will, with all of our strength, with all of our heart, and to love our neighbor as ourselves. Correct? We are called to love God with all that we have and to love our neighbor as ourselves, whatever that looks like. That is the gospel message. If we don't do that, we forget the gospel message if we don't actually act upon what we have heard. I'm not sure that Baptist minister actually practiced what he preached that day. We actually did get rescued. I'm here, and so we did get rescued. The rest of that afternoon was fascinating. We sat on the side of the road, and people actually stopped to take pictures of us as they were driving by. So I decided to take pictures of them as they were driving by. That stopped the picture taking. John Wesley, as he started the classes, what he called the United Societies, decided that in order for them to be able to function clearly, they needed to have some rules to follow because they were hearing the word, but they were not able to function as Methodists. Methodist. Now, other people called them Methodists because they had a method for being able to do the word. And I think John Wesley was probably reading this text from James when he wrote these 3 rules. What are the 3 rules? Do no harm, do good, stay in love with God. Man, those are easy, right? Yes? Are they easy? I don't know. Do no harm. Now, he has a whole list here of what that means, to do no harm. Now, this is a really long list, and some of his words are archaic, to say the least. But I think that some of them are very apropos for us today. Don't get drunk. Not good. He did say that preachers on a Saturday afternoon might enjoy some ale, but only one. He also said tea is bad for you. Caffeine. He was really against caffeine. Fighting, quarreling, brawling. What does it do for us to fight with our neighbor? James says that we ought to bridle our tongue. What happens to us when our tongue starts to move before we actually use our brain? We start to do harm. We start to do harm. Stuff has come out of my mouth before, and I wonder, can I take it back? But you know what? We never can we? We start to do harm when we use words that are not helpful, and when we start to speak without thinking, when we start to speak without allowing the other to be heard. Speaking is good. Speaking love is good. Speaking with kindness and compassion is good. Speaking words that are hurtful and harmful are not. And fighting just to fight is harmful. Having a good discussion is not harmful. When it starts to hurt the other, that's when it gets harmful. Uncharitable or unprofitable conversation. And this is my favorite. Particularly speaking evil of magistrates or of ministers. Uncharitable or unprofitable conversation? How many of us have been in uncharitable or unprofitable conversations about others, whoever the other is, particularly your pastors? Just remember that. God's listening. The putting on of gold and costly apparel, just something to think about. Just something to think about. Softness and needless self-indulgence. Now, ever so often, we do need to take care of ourselves and go to the spa, because we need that for ourselves. But how often do we need that for ourselves? We do need to think about those days off. He does say, where is it? Because I skipped over it. The profaning the day of the Lord, either by doing ordinary work therein or by buying or selling. And he's thinking about Sunday. Because in his day, nothing happened on Sunday, right? And that was in his day, and that's not an option for us today. So instead of thinking about that on that particular day, is there a day that you take for totally a day off when you are focused on God and family? Not yourself, not work in your house, not work in the yard, not physical work in your job, but focusing on God, family, and others. And God. It's not about you. It's about God. Laying up treasure upon earth does harm. How much stuff do you need? Honestly, how much stuff do you need? Now, we just moved, right? And so people say to me, oh, you probably don't have as much stuff as we do. You know, I've been in my house for however many years. How many years have you been in your house? 50, 40, however many years you've been in your house. Don't be so sure. We all have stuff, and we all have too much stuff, unless, of course, you live in a tiny house. Have you seen those shows, Tiny House? Isn't that quite amazing? Our goal as humans, Neil and I, when we retire, we're going to live in an RV. That's the goal. I'm going to have to get rid of a whole lot of stuff to make that happen. How many storage facilities are here in Norfolk? And why do we have to have storage facilities? Because we're laying up treasure on earth. Because we have too much stuff. That does harm. It does harm to us, and it does harm to our environment. John Wesley knew that. It does harm. The last, doing harm, borrowing without a probability of paying. He knew that a long time ago. Or taking up goods without a probability of paying for them. He didn't have credit cards back then. We have credit cards now. Do you know how far in debt we are as a nation and as individuals? Do good to their bodies of the ability which God giveth, by giving food to the hungry, by clothing the naked, by visiting or helping them that are sick or in prison, by giving food to the hungry. When I think about giving food to the hungry, many people think about looking at their food pantries and giving the food away that they don't like. Oh, I don't don't like beets, so I'm just going to give that away. I particularly don't like beets. I'm sure that some of you really love beets, and I'm sorry for saying that out loud. I said that once, and I had like 10 people tell me, oh, I love beets. Great. But don't just give away the food that you don't like. Give food that you love, because poor people like the same food that you do. Give the great food away, the food that you love away, because we're all the same. Some just have more than others. Give food to the hungry, because there are hungry people who need what we have. Share what you have. Clothing to the naked. How many clothing did you have to throw away because it was dirty? Or did you have to do that, Mary? Okay. Bags of dirty clothes, torn. Just because people are poor does not mean that they wear dirty clothes or torn clothes. Now, ever so often, I will wear a dirty t-shirt. And I'll go outside, but I probably won't go to Hy-Vee in it. Because I don't want to, stink up all of Hy-Vee. Just because something is dirty or has a hole in it does not mean that somebody who can't afford it wants to wear that. Clothe the naked and give them something that's wonderful, that maybe doesn't fit you anymore or doesn't suit you anymore, and give it to them and feel good about what you're giving. I did bag on Wednesday, and at the rummage sale, I had the greatest time. It was frenetic in the morning, and you all will know that. I was not prepared. I will be prepared next year. And they told me I wouldn't be prepared, and I knew that. I was not prepared for what it would feel like to bag or box my stuff. That was interesting. But it felt kind of good at the same time, because I knew that what I had given, it wasn't that I felt, oh, look at me, I'm giving what I have so that you can go and enjoy it, but that someone else could have something small that I had given. I'd given small things, but that someone else could enjoy and can be used, and that what I had that I was not using could be useful to someone else for $1 or for 25 cents. That's what bugged me the most. You mean you're only charging 25 cents for that cup? 25 cents was enough for the person that was purchasing it. And that was good. That was good. Wow. Visiting or helping them. When was the last time that you called somebody who you haven't seen for a while? Called somebody who was sick or ill, or visited them in the nursing home or in the hospital? And not those of you who are Stephen ministers who do that. Send a card, call someone, visit someone who is struggling. Just do that. And on the other end of that phone, what you will hear is the sound of someone who is feeling relief or joy that someone is caring for them and knows that they are loved by God. What a feeling of joy that might be for someone else. You don't know what that might feel like, or you might do know what that feels like, to hear the voice of someone else that loves you and that cares for you. Go do that. Take the time to visit someone else who needs that love and care. to their souls by instructing, reproving, or exhorting all we have any relationships with. We're called to teach one another, to exhort one another about the Christian faith. We're called to be in relationships with each other and to love one another and to be in conversation with one another, to be in Sunday school with one another. The adults do not have Sunday school here, and that will change. That will change. We are called to exhort one another, to teach one another, and to love one another. The last, stay in love with God. I know I'm getting long here, so I'm going to end soon. The public worship of God, you're here. Amen. Worship is not about you. Worship is about God. We have come to worship God, to celebrate God's love in our lives. The supper of the Lord, to participate in the sacrament of Holy Communion. We do that once a month, and we do it every Sunday, every week. It's on Saturday evening. Family and private prayer. Do you pray every day? Every day. If you don't, start doing it. And do you pray just by yourself, or do you pray with others? And do you do all the talking, or do you allow God to speak to you as you sit in silence? Search the scriptures. Read the Bible. If you don't have a Bible, let me know and I can get you one. Search them. Take a Bible study. Sit down and read the Bible. You will learn a lot. The Bible has a lot for us to glean from and understand God and hear the stories of Jesus. Search the scriptures and fast or participate in abstinence. Now, not all of us can do that. Our bodies, each of us has a different body thing happening with us. But when we stop doing something on purpose and we yearn for that which we have given up, it reminds us about the sacrifice that Christ gave for us. When we hear the word that we are called to love God with all that we have and to love our neighbors as ourselves, and we don't actually act upon it by doing the word of God, then we forget who we are as followers of Jesus. If we follow these rules, we might have a chance of hearing the word and also be doers of the word. Amen.